Is the Eastern Mediterranean becoming Israel's new front against Turkey? Israel's regional maneuvers could further destabilize the Eastern Mediterranean and widen tensions with Turkey. Two meetings, held almost simultaneously towards the end of December, offered a stark illustration of the competing strategic visions now shaping the Eastern Mediterranean and the Levant. In Damascus, Turkey's foreign, defense and intelligence chiefs met Syrian officials on December 22nd as Ankara continued to prioritize the consolidation of state authority and stabilization after the fall of Bashar al-Assad's government in Syria. On the same day, Israel hosted Greece and Cyprus for the latest iteration of their trilateral framework. 2 days before that meeting, Israel launched another air attack on Syria, one of more than 600 strikes in 2025, a reminder to Ankara and Damascus that Israel is willing to disrupt Syria's recovery from war. While officially framed around energy cooperation and regional connectivity, the trilateral agenda between Israel, Greece, and Cyprus has steadily expanded to encompass security coordination and military alignment, signaling a shift from economic competition to strategic containment. For Cem Gerdeniz, a retired admiral and one of the architects of Turkey's Blue Homeland maritime doctrine that called for Ankara to safeguard its interests across the surrounding seas, the Aegean, Eastern Mediterranean, and the Black Sea, the meeting was an attempt to exclude and encircle Turkey. Gerdeniz describes Israel's approach as an indirect containment strategy aimed not at confrontation but at altering Ankara's behavior. The objective is not war, but behavioral change, narrowing Turkey's strategic space to induce withdrawal without conflict, he told, warning against treating the standoff as routine energy competition. For Israel, the trilateral framework reflects unease with Turkey's approach in Syria, which prioritizes territorial integrity and the restoration of central authority, an outcome that runs counter to Israel's preference for a fragmented regional security landscape. Greece and Cyprus, meanwhile, view the partnership as a means to advance maritime boundary claims and energy corridors that would marginalize Turkey's role in the Eastern Mediterranean. Security and military cooperation now form a central pillar of the trilateral agenda, according to Muzaffar Senel, a visiting scholar of European studies at Marmara University. All three actors have sought to create fait accompli through unilateral initiatives in the region in what they jointly perceive as a common rival, Turkey. Senel told in reference to possible security and energy arrangements between the three countries that could threaten Ankara's interests. Israel's gambit. The decision to hold the trilateral meeting in Israel was not incidental. It reflected the shrinking diplomatic space available to the Israeli leadership as the genocidal war on Gaza deepens Israel's international isolation. With Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu facing an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court, ICC, for war crimes and crimes against humanity, his ability to travel abroad has become increasingly constrained, particularly to countries that are signatories to the court, such as Greece and Cyprus. The Greek government, while not rejecting the ICC's warrant for Netanyahu, which also includes one for Israel's former defense minister, Yoav Gallant, has said that these decisions do not help. Cyprus has also noted that the ICC warrants are binding. Neither has publicly said that they will not execute the warrants. Hosting the Greek and Cypriot leaders in Israel was therefore not simply a logistical choice, but a symptom of how legal and diplomatic pressures are reshaping Israel's outlook and pushing it towards security-centric alliances. At the same time, the meeting served to recast Turkey as a regional problem through coded Ottoman references and narratives of expansionist ambition aimed at eroding Ankara's interests in the Eastern Mediterranean. Standing alongside Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis and Cypriot President Nikos Christodoulides, Netanyahu, a longtime advocate of a greater Israel, warned that those who fantasize they can re-establish their empires and their dominion over our land should forget it, a remark widely interpreted as a reference to Turkey. As a peninsula state, Turkey has more than 8,300 kilometers of coastline. Greece argues its Aegean islands, many of which lie just off the Turkish coast, generate their own exclusive economic zones, extending maritime claims up to about 370 kilometers. Ankara rejects this, saying islands cannot create full EEZs and that borders should be drawn from the mainland. Cyprus is another flashpoint. After a Greek Cypriot coup in 1974, Turkey intervened as a guarantor power, splitting the island. Turkey is the only country to recognize the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. In 2004, the North backed a United Nations reunification plan, but the Greek-administered South rejected it, leaving the conflict unresolved. In the Eastern Mediterranean, these regional wedge issues have given Israel an opportunity to insert itself and further inflame tensions. Greece, in particular, has sought to leverage Israel's close ties with Washington to secure diplomatic backing in long-standing maritime boundary disputes. Greece seeks to involve the U.S. through Israel in order to gain diplomatic backing for resolving Eastern Mediterranean maritime boundary issues, said Senel. Those disputes, involving gas exploration rights also claimed by Turkey, have long fueled regional tensions and now form part of a broader effort to constrain Ankara's strategic room for maneuver. While no formal collective defense agreement has been signed, high-level cooperation among the three states is moving beyond ad hoc coordination towards a more institutionalized security framework. The inclusion of the United States as a like-minded partner under a so-called 3+1 format, Senel noted, clearly conveys a strategic message directed at Turkey. Although the trilateral mechanism stops short of a formal military alliance, its trajectory points towards deeper security and defense cooperation, reinforcing Ankara's perception of an emerging containment axis in the Eastern Mediterranean. Emerging anti-Turkey axis. Relations between Greece, Cyprus, and Israel have not been hindered by Israel's genocidal war on Gaza, which began in October 2023. Unlike several other European Union states that have described Israel's campaign in Gaza as genocide or ethnic cleansing and called for sanctions over violations of international law, Greece and Cyprus have remained largely silent while expanding cooperation with Israel. In the current context, where the Greek Cypriots will assume the presidency of the Council of the EU, and at a time when the EU is ignoring Turkey's geostrategic position and importance, finding diplomatic pathways to alleviate the tensions is a hard task, said Zeynep Alemdar, Foreign Policy Program Director at the Center for Economics and Foreign Policy Studies in Istanbul. EU officials do not understand the mutual benefits of including Turkey in the energy and defense calculations of the region, Alemdar told. In December, Greek parliamentarians approved the purchase of 36 PLS rocket artillery systems from Israel for approximately $760 million. The two countries are also advancing towards a major defense agreement estimated at $3.5 billion, under which Israeli defense firms would construct a multi-layered air defense system for Greece. In September 2025, Cyprus also received an Israeli-made air defense system costing tens of millions of dollars, with further deliveries expected. Turkey will surely try to dilute this coalition through diplomacy with its Middle Eastern allies, yet Israel's disruption will continue. Israel's and Turkey's interests in the region will bring about more confrontations, noted Alemdar. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said that Turkey will not allow violations of its rights in the Aegean and the Mediterranean, without naming the three countries or referring directly to their meeting. Rear Admiral Zeki Akturk, the press and public relations advisor and spokesperson for the Ministry of Defense, sought to downplay the trilateral meeting, noting that it does not pose a military threat to Turkey. Turkey, for its part, has also embarked on its largest naval procurement process, with a price tag estimated at about $8 billion and 31 ships in the process of being built in 2025 alone to defend its interests in the Eastern Mediterranean. The process has largely been driven by skirmishes between Greece and Turkey dating back to 2020, when both parties used naval assets to lay claim to conflicting economic zones, and when Ankara realized it needed to invest more in its navy to avoid being squeezed out of the Eastern Mediterranean. Turkey's regional approach. Analysts are also warning that Turkey's calibrated response to the trilateral meeting risks underestimating a broader pattern of Israeli provocations across multiple theaters. From Syria to the Eastern Mediterranean, and, more recently, Somalia, following Israel's recognition of the breakaway Somaliland region, Israel has demonstrated a willingness to exploit political fractures in ways that undermine state consolidation. In Syria, this approach has been particularly visible and feeds into Israel's policies in the Eastern Mediterranean. The Israeli bombing of the presidential palace and the Ministry of Defense in Damascus in July last year was widely seen as an attempt to weaken the Syrian government at a moment of renewed diplomatic engagement. Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan warned in December that the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, SDF, were in coordination with Israel to obstruct Syria's stabilization. A recent Al Jazeera Arabic investigation obtained hours of leaked audio recordings of senior military officers from the regime of the ousted leader al-Assad, discussing plans to destabilize Syria and suggesting coordination with Israel. Taken together, Israeli actions in Syria increasingly resemble a template for indirect pressure, not aimed at direct confrontation with Turkey, but at constraining Ankara's influence by entrenching instability along its southern flank. In seeking to grind down Turkey and Syria while advancing its naval strategy in the eastern Mediterranean, the result is a dual-pressure model that exhausts and distracts Turkey, turning each move into a potential crisis and steadily eroding its initiative, said the retired Turkish Admiral Cem Gerdeniz. Israeli recognition of Somaliland likely reinforces Turkey's concern that Israel is willing to legitimize breakaway coastal entities when doing so undercuts stabilization efforts aligned with Turkey's maritime interests. This approach also finds support within Israel's ideological ecosystem. The right-wing political theorist Yoram Hazony, a close ally of Netanyahu, has openly argued for the fragmentation of regional states such as Iraq and Syria into smaller entities organized along sectarian or communal lines, a vision that aligns with policies privileging division over consolidation. Turkey should stop treating this as episodic friction and treat it as Israel's deliberate attempt to shape the post-Assad order in Syria while tightening a Mediterranean alignment that sidelines Ankara. Andreas Krieg, associate professor of security studies at King's College London, told. The response needs to be practical, coercive in the political sense, and geared to results rather than signaling, he added. Turkey has a track record of acting proactively when it believes its national interests are at stake. In Libya, Ankara's military support for the internationally recognized government in 2020 prevented its collapse. Similarly, Ankara's backing of Azerbaijan in its war with Armenia helped tip the balance, enabling Baku to recapture territory occupied by Armenian forces. Israeli threats to destabilize Syria, Somalia, and Yemen could provide Ankara with an opening with countries it has had rocky relations, since improved, within recent years, mainly Saudi Arabia and Egypt, which increasingly are also threatened by Israeli influence in the region and have most recently condemned Israeli recognition of Somaliland. Ankara should not only expand relations with such key Arab states, Krieg said, it also needs to take practical steps that make alternative formats commercially and strategically attractive. Turkey will not dismantle that Eastern Mediterranean axis with rhetoric, he added. Ankara should expose and disrupt Israeli influence operations rather than arguing about motives, he warned, adding that the point is to make it politically expensive for Israel to posture as a stabilizer while acting as a patron of breakaway structures, said Krieg. The strategic risk for Turkey is gradualism. Ankara's objective should be explicit: prevent a permanent Israeli security carve-out in southern Syria and prevent an eastern Mediterranean order in which Ankara is boxed in, Krieg concluded.